What's up everyone, and welcome back to the Bold and the Beautiful 24 official channel. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button today. Let's get started. Brooke's new concerns as Thomas starts to disengage. Brooke Logan has been on the soap opera roller coaster once more, according to the Bold and the Beautiful document. After almost drowning, Ridge Forrester saved her in Italy. Their hasty marriages resulted from that. Carter Walton expressed his gratitude for being a part of this most recent reunion. In the executive offices of Forrester Creations, the frequently married couple was remarried by the resident officiant of B&B. That brings the most often married couple in this soap show back together. But one crazy sun is hanging over their happy reunion. Following the breakdown of his engagement, Thomas Forrester is upset that his father has harmed his mother and holds Brooke accountable. Eric Forrester was correct. Eric Forrester had always stated that the first time a wedding took place in the executive suite of Forrester Creations. As longtime fans are aware, Eric's living room at his opulent mansion has hosted numerous weddings. Since the laws in this version of California seem to be so lenient, Ridge evidently didn't care that he didn't have a license. Of all, especially in the case of Ridge and Brooke, marriage is hardly a sacrament on B&B. 8 promises have been made and broken by them. Therefore, the most recent resuscitation may be the beginning of the end, and viewers must consider whether this is the relationship that will last. They would appear destined to carry on the reunification pattern eternally even if it didn't. It was never appropriate for Ridge Forrester to agree. Ridge was under pressure from Taylor Hayes to get engaged. In order to tie the soapy knot, she asked him to promise. After some hesitation, he consented after certain ads were aired or digitally skipped during a later or time-shifted viewing. Ridge made a mistake there. She wouldn't be as devastated now if he hadn't consented to remarry the lady with whom he has 3 children. However, Eric was aware that Ridge was forcing himself into a predicament. He regularly and loudly reprimanded his adopted son. After a while, Ridge realized his father was correct and took the required action, but it was a complicated process with lots of collateral harm. Before the return of Steffy Forrester Finnegan. With the children, Steffy Forrester Finnegan is taking a vacation to decompress. There will be more emotional stomach punches when she returns. However, Thomas is spearheading the attack on Brooke until the aforementioned occurs. Thomas thinks his father lacks self-control, therefore he holds Brooke responsible. Thomas's lack of emotional maturity and ongoing risk to people who are thought to have wronged him or his family are reinforced by the immature belief that Brooke is Ridge's puppeteer. In actuality, despite his several marriages to both women, Ridge has always loved Brooke more than Taylor. Brooke, who is aware of Thomas's history of instability, which includes committing numerous felonies, perceives him as a threat since he refuses to acknowledge that truth. Brooke Logan should be celebrating her recent whirlwind remarriage to Ridge Forrester, the man who has always been her destiny through decades of victories, betrayals, separations, and dramatic reconciliations, but instead of feeling at ease, she is experiencing a renewed wave of fear because Thomas Forrester, his son, who has never forgiven her for winning Ridge's heart and is now starting to spin out again, is looming over her fragile happiness like a storm cloud, reminding everyone in Los Angeles that the cycle of obsession and manipulation that has characterized his adult life is never far from resurfacing. Additionally, Brooke is aware that danger is brewing even though Ridge may be trying to persuade his new bride that this time is different and that they will finally make it work after breaking and remaking their vows for the 8th time. She can see it in Thomas's eyes every time he enters a room, the resentment that simmers beneath his words, the jabs he throws at her about being the reason his family with Taylor Hayes never stayed intact, and the eerie calm before his inevitable outbursts that remind her of all the times he has crossed the line in the past. From manipulating Hope Logan with that creepy mannequin to concealing baby Beth's identity in order to maintain his ideal life with Hope. And Brooke, who has witnessed more soap opera confrontations than anyone else, sees the warning signs that Thomas is breaking down once more. This time, the pain of losing his job after leaving Forrester Creations, the heartbreak over his failed engagement to Paris Buckingham, and the heartbreaking realization that his mother Taylor has once again been abandoned by Ridge, who, in line with his destiny, rushed to her aid when Brooke called for help in Italy, pulling her out of the water like the eternal hero of her tale, sealed their fate with a passionate kiss that rekindled their relationship and brought them directly to the executive offices of Forrester Creations, where Carter Walton performed their impetuous wedding. A scene that should have been happy but carried with it the obvious weight of collateral damage because, as always, Eric Forrester warned Ridge not to put himself in a tight spot by making promises he couldn't keep. Forrester knew full well that agreeing to Taylor's engagement demand was a mistake made out of guilt and pressure, and now that mistake has become Thomas's obsession because, instead of accepting that Brooke will always have Ridge's heart, Thomas has once again decided that Brooke is the manipulator, the villain, and the one who manipulates Ridge and makes him do whatever she wants. When in reality Ridge is just a man incapable of denying his lifelong passion for Brooke. However, the more Thomas rants, the more dangerous the situation gets because Brooke can't ignore the fact that he has a history of going beyond the law whenever he feels cornered. Ridge claims he can manage his son, but Brooke remembers the times when Thomas almost lost himself in his obsession, when even Steffi Forrester Finnegan worried about his sanity. Now that Steffi is on vacation trying to get her mind straight after her own series of traumatic events, the burden of keeping an eye on Thomas falls heavily on Brooke, leaving her uneasy and worried as she wonders what new scheme he might be planning because his words to Ridge are laced with veiled threats about family loyalty, and his accusations against Brooke get worse with each encounter. And his insistence that Ridge owes Taylor a duty starts to feel less like a son standing up for his mother and more like a man on the verge of another spiral, one that could endanger everyone. Brooke, who has seen countless rivalries, is aware that Thomas's type of obsession is particularly dangerous because he doesn't just stop at words. Instead, he weaponizes his pain, intelligence, and ability to manipulate technology, images, and emotions, creating the terrifying possibility that he already has evidence of Ridge kissing her in Italy, possibly broken by his own hand, and could use it as leverage, blackmail, or worse. A public scandal intended to degrade Brooke and subdue Ridge, and while fans from their couches scoff at yet another instance of Thomas manipulating his parents' love life, they also admit that his unpredictable behavior adds a level of danger that makes every scene tense because he could go from brooding silence to explosive confrontation, from passive-aggressive remarks to outright emotional blackmail. This unpredictability is what makes Brooke's fears seem justified because she is not just being paranoid. Rather, she is drawing on years of experience to witnessing Thomas's pattern, and despite Ridge's attempts to reassure her by claiming that their love is unbreakable and that he will not allow his son to ruin their happiness, Brooke can't help but think of Taylor, who is still holding on to the hope that Ridge will keep his word, who is probably encouraged by Thomas's insistence that the family can still be reunited, and who might end up becoming a pawn in Thomas's disintegration because Taylor's heartbreak is genuine and unadulterated, and Brooke is aware that a son's desperate attempts to keep his parents together can turn a mother's suffering into a weapon, which only makes her more concerned that Thomas will do whatever it takes to keep her daughter in his orbit because of his spiraling behavior. This keeps Brooke awake at night, her mind racing with scenarios in which Thomas snaps, manipulates, or worse, does something that cannot be undone, and as she gazes at Ridge across their marital bed, she questions not only whether this union can withstand the storm, but also whether she herself will be able to withstand the wrath of a man who has never accepted her place in Ridge's life. The reason Brooke's fresh anxieties become more than mere melodrama is because Thomas Forrester, spinning out, cornered, and desperate, is the kind of threat that foreshadows another approaching catastrophe in the endless tale of the bold and the beautiful.